webinar today, where we'll be learning more from Vincent Petit, who's the SBC global lead at the headquarters and the architect behind the current organizational strengthening of our C4D strategies, and maybe refocusing some of these strategies towards the areas that have not been so strong in the past. He will be talking to us for about 40 minutes, and then he will be joined by Fatima Fraz, who's an SBC specialist from UNICEF Pakistan country office, who's worked in the polio program there for years. And many of you know that Pakistan has obviously a very strong C4D SBC programming underway, and she'll be talking about some of the specific ways they have already been implementing some of these SBC strategies. Before I give it to Vincent, Audrey will give some guidance on the interpretation and Q&A session. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening, afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. As you can see, we have interpreters. So please thank you, Vincent and Fatima, speak at a regular pace so they can interpret in a timely fashion. You can also see that you have a little, I guess it's a something like
it's an echo going on. Echo.
There's an echo.
I see two of you, Audrey. There is two Audrey Frenchy in the list.
Yeah, there's two of me.
Yes.
Is it better now?
Much better.
Okay, then I muted my second self. Thank you, Vincent, for that. So as you can see, we have a little globe with interpretation. You can pick the channel that you want. The main room will be in English. Both presenters will present in English, and the second room will be in French with the interpretation. I also shared in the chat both presentation in French and in English. So if you want to follow the English channel, just open the link that has been shared in the chat box, and you will have had access to the French presentation. I hope this is clear. I hope there's no more echo. And Vincent, over to you. I am gonna make you a host so you can share your screen.
All right, thank you. I was trying to take a look. Sorry, good morning, good afternoon first, everyone. So Vincent, the lead of SBC in HQ. I was looking through the list of participants to see how many of the SBC colleagues were on the line, but I see it's a diverse audience, which is good because I gave that exact same presentation just yesterday morning to the SBC network, and we had a few hundred people. So those who participated yesterday, I guess you can go take a coffee for the next few minutes if you want, and come back for the discussion. Okay, let me share my screen quickly. All right, is it on?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Great. All right. So just a disclaimer, I used to be a polio person as well. That's how I started in UNICEF. I was polio in DRC when there was still polio in DRC. And then for some time, I was part of the C4D HQ polio team as well. And I have been deployed quite a few times to mostly in Nigeria and Afghanistan, and some of the outbreaks as well, especially Chad, Equatorial Guinea, and a few. So I've had a few years of polio, but I have also completely lost touch with polio. So that's going to be an interesting discussion today. So I'm going to present to you that repositioning, reframing, shift from C4D to SBC, try and explain where it's coming from and what that concretely means and what it doesn't mean. So I'll start with one of the main reasons why we're doing that is that if you take a look at the UNICEF strategic plan, it is completely filled with behaviors. Like there are behavioral results everywhere in all of the goal areas. Some of them are up there on the slide. You can see them. They relate to health, they relate to education, to protection. And so fundamentally, UNICEF is in the business of changing behaviors. Some of these behaviors are even impact level in the strategic plan. Most of them are outcome levels. Yet it is questionable to which extent we are actually embracing the science that is behind changing behaviors, whether it is the cognitive sciences, the neuroscience, the behavioral science, strictly speaking, the social sciences, where we do a bit better, but it is questionable. There is, and these results are very often not recognized as such, by the way. Out there in the world, other organizations that compare to us, and you have a few here on the slides, large international organizations, have vastly embraced that rise of behavioral science in the past decade. Governments as well. So the 200 behavioral science teams that I mentioned on these slides have been largely opened by public institutions, but also by some of these international ones. The World Bank, in particular, the Embed team that is here, was behind one of the first large behavioral science report, the World Development Report 2015, which is the flagship yearly report of the World Bank, first of its kind, and since then have done a few that we've participated to. Probably interesting to you as well is the recent WHO Technical Advisory Group that was created on behavioral science. WHO has been stepping in more strongly in that field with this advisory group, but also with the hiring of an increasing number of people on the ground, including on RCCE, risk communication and community engagement related to COVID. So basically the landscape have been evolving. The partners have been strengthening their activities, and UNICEF has not necessarily always followed that path on behavioral science. One thing I need to clarify is that we're not shifting to a behavioral science group. And the very reason that we're not doing that is that a lot of these behaviors to take effect, like for people to take the practice, to use the services, to change what they're doing, there needs to be a social change that comes first as a precondition. I'll take an example on the slide. For example, you see assisted delivery as one of the behaviors. It's very difficult for women to use assisted delivery services if they don't have social mobility. So if they don't have the agency as women to go to the health center or to interact with service providers that are acceptable culturally, the service will not be used. So and that's true pretty much throughout all of the behaviors. So social transformation is very often a precondition for these behaviors, which is tricky in UNICEF because, as I said, the behaviors are what the sectors are interested in because that's their results, that's their accountability. It's much more difficult to land the social transformation results. Whether it is in the strategic plan or in the country offices, we don't really find a good space to place these results and to build the collaboration around them. That being said, that's why we are social and behavior change and not a behavior change team. It is because the social transformation is one of our key accountability as well. One of the reasons also why we're trying to change what we're doing was some technical shortcomings or quality shortcomings with the type of strategies that we've implemented for the past few decades. The example I'm taking here is from this study that we published in 2019 with Drexel University. Drexel helped us review a few thousand C4D strategies for VAC, for violence against children. Eventually, a few hundreds were coded, matching the criteria. So there are a few interesting numbers in this report. So for example, out of the 500 strategies that were coded and reviewed, you find in the report that only 17% of them discuss formative research, which is fairly concerning because the choice of strategies, the choice of programmatic approach, the way we invest the money should absolutely, obviously be driven by evidence about what is necessary to do. So that tends to show that we don't necessarily always understand why people do what they do. And so the causal link or the the rational link between the evidence and the strategy is not always explained, which might indicate that it could be missing. On the second criteria, which is how many of these strategies reported openly addressing social norms, the result was even more worrying because it was almost none. When in fact we know that these forms of violence are highly normative and driven by, in particular, gender norms. And the last similarly worrying piece of information out of the report was that pretty much half of the strategies did not refer any conceptual model. And there are many conceptual models out there for social change, for behavior change. UNICEF traditionally uses the socio-ecological model that we've used for many times that I believe might still be used in polio as well. We have a few others, but no conceptual model was pretty worrying. So overall, what I'm trying to say with these numbers is that, and those who have been in C4D before know that we had some shortcomings in the way we decide what we do, we monitor what we do, we measure the results, and we have had a lot of preconceived go-to default interventions that usually revolve around communication campaigns without really analyzing the problems that we're trying to solve. So on the behavioral science side, what we're trying to move towards is, I guess, trying to base our actions on a more, I don't want to say scientific because people tend to be scared by scientific, but a more objective analysis of what's happening. And the reason we do a lot of communication campaigns is because the preconceived idea behind it is that people decide on what they do based on what they think or what they know, what they're aware of, how they experience something. So based on their mind, basically, that the decision comes from them. There is a lot, and for those who are interested in behavioral science literature, we can indicate a few good pieces out there. There's a lot of evidence that these behaviors are actually driven by environmental factors most of the time. The environment is a big word for many things. Very concretely, that might mean the social environment that I just mentioned before. So, the gender norms, the social norms, what is accepted in your community, what is supported. And that's the reason why we work very often with influencers. That might also very concretely be the infrastructure environment itself. How much you're able to move around, access a service, can you pay for the service? Is the service fitting your needs? Is it culturally appropriate? Are you being treated decently when you access the service? It is also the legal environment, the laws like, are you able to breastfeed at work? Is violence condemned or not? Is marital rape legal or not? It is the economic environment, which is cutting across everything we do. Most of the issues that we're dealing with have a direct link to poverty, and people who are poor, facing financial stress, are usually behaving in very different ways, consciously and unconsciously. There's a strong evidence of cognitive depletion with when you're facing financial hardship. And the environment is also the communication environment, which is something we are more used to. And the way people, behaviors, gender roles are depicted in the movies, in the TV shows, on the radio, in the newspapers, also has a strong influence on what people do. So what I'm trying to say with that is that most of these influences come from the outside. And for a long time, what we've been doing in UNICEF and in many other fields is that to change behaviors, we've been trying to change the people more than trying to change the context. Long story short, we need to do both, but we've been overly focusing on changing the people, so overly focusing on rational cognitive approach, and it has had shortcomings. Now, to be fully honest, the cognitive part of it is even more complex than what I just said. Most of you have probably heard of system 1 and system 2 in the brain, or slow brain and fast brain, or reptilian brain, or survival brain. what has been proven very clearly is that we have different ways of making decisions. The vast majority of the decisions are made by part of the brain that relies on biases, on stereotypes, on heuristics, and it is made for quick reaction. It is made to minimize the effort. It is made to be automatic, to be quicker, and it's linked to like survival mechanisms that date from pretty much when humankind was born. The other part of the brain, that the one we address with the mostly with the campaigns, is more rational, but it's not the part that makes most of the decision because it's just too much effort. So we also struggle to consider that type of neuroscience reality in the interventions that we followed. One example, we take an example on immunization. I was in Nairobi in SRO a couple of weeks ago, and we worked on the COVID-19 vaccine acceptance factors with the network, with the 21 countries. So we listed these factors that are common across all of the countries. All of these affect the uptake or the acceptance of the vaccine. So starting from the top, there is the cognitive factors that I mentioned before. So the knowledge, awareness, forgetfulness. There's a lot of forgetfulness actually. And then moving to the left, so the social aspects that I already explained before. Who are the decision makers? What is your level of agency to actually go and take the vaccines? There is the rumors and misinformation that you are more than aware of in polio, the fear of side effects. Similarly, the other needs and priorities, you very well understand that given the context where you're working. The issues of trust, which have been skyrocketing recently with the pandemic, but have always been there and have their roots in way back in the days, even to colonial ages for most of the countries. So it's the trust in the system, who is the authority, up to the vaccine itself, obviously, up to the product itself. And then on the right side, elements that we traditionally consider more supply related. So the experience at the point of service with the health workers role in particular, our capacity to deliver to hard to reach populations, the cost that getting the vaccine entails, whether it is because you have to go there or you have to pay for it or you have to not work on that particular day, and then elements of time, waiting time, when can you actually get the vaccine, the distance, how difficult it is to go to the vaccination site, and all the way to, is there even any vaccine there? Interestingly, we looked at some data from Kenya. More than 30% of those who were not vaccinated actually tried to get the vaccine in Kenya. So what I'm trying to say with that is just linking with the more conceptual part that I described before about mind and environment. There's a lot of what drives demand that is not related to what most of the colleagues consider demand. What colleagues consider demand side factors is going to be knowledge, gender, norm support, rumors and fears, side effects, and that's pretty much it. So the top left part of this diagram is what a C4D person would typically be asked to work on. You can very easily understand the problem, which is that demand is also driven by all the rest. And we have a role to play in that. We have a role to play in that because these elements can be strongly influenced by social evidence, behavioral evidence, and by a series of participation and engagement mechanisms. So most of the countries in SR are already doing pretty good work on that. They are doing obviously the usual micro planning, but they went further, and so a few countries are already doing human-centered design for the health services. So really trying to go into the weeds about designing the immunization service with the providers themselves. We are doing behavioral insights. We are doing a lot of financial support, support the cash transfer, support the targeting of the cash transfer, support the feedback and accountability mechanisms about these cash transfers, working a lot with the health workers, obviously working with mapping and trying to understand the hard to reach communities. So we have a strong role to play on what is being considered the supply side. And the last reason why we need to change is because we matter in the field. We are the largest network. So at the moment, we have a little bit more than 500 positions that are SBC positions, but some of them are vacant. And anyway, long story short, it's around 500 staff, which is the largest team after the big five in UNICEF. So after health, nutrition, education, protection, and WASH comes us. So it's a pretty big network, and no other organization has a network that big. So what we do actually matters for the field, and a lot of partner agencies look upon us to see what we're doing, where we're going. We are called upon leading many times, especially during emergencies. And COVID was one more example of it, but it was the same before with Ebola, with Zika, with the avian flu. So we have a responsibility to try and be the best. And the other responsibility we have is because of the amount of money we spend. And the number you see on that slide, $500 million pretty much, is what we've spent last year, according to the coding in the system, the PIDB codes. So anyway, long story short, that's how much we spent, which is an enormous amount of money, and should drive us to make sure that this money is spent wisely and not on default strategies that might not deliver the best results. So in a nutshell, the reason why we're trying to change is because, one, UNICEF results are behavioral and social in nature. So we are moving to an outcome-focused position where we're trying to focus on exactly what it is that we're trying to deliver. Two, because C4D has not always been the best, might be very different for the polio program, I'm aware of that. But in many cases, it's been ad hoc and not very strategic and not really based on science. Three is that COVID-19 actually gave us a pretty good momentum. It was a nightmare to deal with, and most of us are on burnout because of that. But the reality is that it was a pretty good reminder that these disease outbreaks in particular are all about people, and that people's behavior can fuel or stop these outbreaks. One more reason we discussed with the management is that Agenda 2030 is vastly off track. If you go to the UN website and check the indicators, we are really off track and looking for accelerators. And we do believe that quality, social, and behavior change can be one of these accelerators. We also have new challenges coming up. Unfortunately, mental health is one of them. And for these new challenges, the importance of social and behavior change is anticipated to be pretty high, especially, as I said, mental health typically will not be solved at scale with doctors, health facilities, and expert-based approach. It's going to have to be a more prevention side type of approach. And then the last reason is because the partners are improving. They're moving, and it's great for us because it gives us better partners to work with, but we also need to keep our edge as an organization. So these are the reasons. So what we've been trying to do is focus on quality of programming. That's the main angle. Programming excellence, as we say in UNICEF language, with two main pillars: people participation, or engagement, or social accountability, or co-design, or whatever you want to call it, but working nothing for the people without the people, pretty much. And the other one is science. It's everything I've just explained about analyzing the problems for what they are, collecting opinions, tracking the uptake of behaviors, cracking down the code, trying to understand exactly precisely why people do or don't do something. And both of these things necessarily lead to expanding what we do beyond communication, because we can't answer this problem with just strictly speaking communication. So yeah, the main problem we have in UNICEF is that people don't want to change, and I include myself in that. So it's not a criticism, it's just a reality. Change is hard, organizational change is hard, individual change is hard, and that's why we have experts to that process. We've been working on the change for about 2 years. It's been slowed down because of the little side business of the pandemic response, but we've been driving that process with the global technical team. We have a global technical team now in SBC, which includes all of the advisors and a few other people. We've been trying to tackle that fairly systematically. So from the strategic plan all the way to the job descriptions, through the programmatic and operational guidance and the partnerships. So we have had a fairly ambitious agenda. I quote here 45 initiatives going on in parallel, a lot of people to handle that contributed to that, SBC staff, and if some of you on the call have been part of it, thank you. And a lot of partners, institutions, those that I've mentioned before and others. So examples of a few first things that came out of this effort to reposition is the way we are described in the strategic plan. This is the strategic plan theory of change. For those who've not seen it yet, the red pin top left, we are a change strategy. We used to be buried as a bullet point under another change strategy, so we were pretty difficult to find. Now it's a fairly prominent approach, so that's the recognition that community engagement as a process and social and behavior change as a field of expertise is going to be critical if we want to achieve our results. In medium-term changes, we have a lot of things related to behavior, but in particular one that says positive behaviors, social and gender norms. And then the reason for all of the red pins to the right links to what I said on the first slide. Sorry. What I said on the first slide, which is all of these goal areas are absolutely filled with behavioral results. And you can see that the definition to the right of what the change strategy is kind of links to what I tried to explain, which is that we need to tackle the drivers of these behaviors, whatever they are. So if they are cognitive, we'll do it. But if they are social, economic, or structural, this is what needs to be done. Which already raises the idea of mutual accountability, because obviously the social and behavior change team cannot be the only one in charge of doing all of that. A lot of what needs to be done is the responsibility of the sectors. We have a webpage that I invite you to visit. The reason it might sound surprising that I mentioned a webpage, but believe it or not, we didn't have a public-facing C4D page on the unicef.org, on the new one. So now we have a social and behavior change. So you can find it at unicef.org, social and behavior change. And we're starting to list their resources, partners, explain what we do. It's work in progress. We're going to keep on improving that. Much more importantly, we developed for the past year and a half the first program guidance. We didn't have a C4D program guidance. Now we have an SBC program guidance. It is available on sbcguidance.org. It's public facing so that the partners, the governments can also access it. So feel free to take a look, feel free to share it. It is structured in the 4 buckets that you see at the bottom. So trying to explain what we do in the vision, trying to explain the fundamental approach in the second part, and then there's everything about strategy design and practical tools. A lot of the part about the fundamental approaches includes 7 strategies, and that's going to link again to what I said a couple of times already, which is there is in red what we were already doing, what we are supposed to be doing, what is our main accountability, and where we play the lead role. And it is community engagement, it is communication, and it is trying to leverage better all of the behavioral science out there. But the guidance also opens the door to a support role on the supply side of things, which is sectoral accountability, but trying to use the data, the engagement, the evidence we have to help the colleagues improve public policies, to help them strengthen the systems, and to help them deliver better services. So the guidance reflects this shift towards approaches beyond communications. This is just to show it in a different way. Basically, we were already strong in communication, community engagement. That remains the pillar, the core, and the center of what we do. We're just trying to go a little bit further on additional approaches that would help us deliver the results. Concretely, in terms of tools and tactics, the list on the left is what we were already quite good at doing. So qualitative data, we're pretty good. Community engagement, social mobilization, even local governance, we were doing pretty good. And then the engagement itself, communication, campaigns, edutainment, even digital engagement, even though it should be strengthened, we're already there. The part to the left is where I think we still have progress to make, and that's as I mentioned before, the HCD, human-centered design approach, the quantitative approach about behaviors and even social change. We're not so good at measuring that. Social listening went through the roof with the pandemic, which is great. I just hope we can maintain that when the funding from COVID dries up. The entire BI, behavioral insights field with the nudges, the choice architecture is also something we're trying to make progress on. And working through sectoral system, feedback and accountability. So all of these is what we're trying to push to improve what the colleagues are doing. Just an illustration, we are developing a lot of capacity building resources that we're going to put online, available to everyone. There's, I don't know how many, but there are many courses in the pipeline, some tailored to management, some tailored to SBC staff, some tailored to a whole of UNICEF audience, most of them available to external audience as well. So one that's already online is digging into this idea of different drivers of behaviors, and we use the case of child marriage. We started this year our own behavioral science unit, which is a discrete unit. It's more of a community of practice between HQ, regional offices, country offices. So we've done that with Innocenti. It's called the BIRD Lab, the Behavioral Science Research and Design Lab, and it's our own embryo of a BI unit. We have already 15 projects and counting, and it's going quite well. So you can also visit that website if you want. It's on Innocenti. We have focused a lot on results. One commonality that we found across most of the country program documents, most of the strategies, is that there is a discrepancy between the narrative where people identify very well the social drivers, the behavioral issues. And then when we move to the results framework, these results are nowhere to be found. So typically a country program document would be all about social norms and how gender impacts everything we do, but we would struggle to see results related to progress on these areas. And so to help with that, we've broken down the strategic plan, and for all of the goal areas that you see to the right, for all of the sub areas, the technical ones that you see to the right in black, and for all of the cross-cutting ones that you see at the bottom, one by one, we have defined behavioral results, individual and social. So individual will include your typical knowledge awareness, but we've gone also into issues of more complex issues of self-efficacy and biases to action, and social ones, and we've paired them with indicators, means of measurement. So there's a gold mine of results that now can be handpicked and put into funding proposal, country program documents, whatever it is. The reason being that when the results are not there, it's the kind of the original sin that then drives the lack of funding, the lack of cooperation with the sectors, the difficulty to report on what we do. And last piece of resource that I want to mention is related to evidence of impact. We are often asked to prove what is the value added, what is the result of SBC strategies, and we have traditionally struggled a little bit with that because we are not so good at measuring it, at least in UNICEF. And we've done a mapping and a canvassing of everything we could find out there, trying to use high quality, strict criteria. So we only looked at quantitative measurement that was proven with randomized control trial, or with systematic review of randomized control trials, articles that were peer-reviewed, article in high credibility journals like Nature, The Lancet, Science, and so on, and only recent and published in the last 10 years. And despite these strong criteria, strict criteria, we found hundreds of great studies proving the impact of social and behavior change on different sectoral results. One of the main barriers was the ability to actually understand these results. So these are two examples that I copy-pasted from scientific publications, and that's how people express the results, which is, you've probably read a lot of scientific publications. I still don't understand most of it. So we work with a statistician to translate these things and create the type of cards that you see to the left, where we put up the, what is it about? So here, maternal mortality as an example. What is the SBC strategies, which is here a community action cycle strategy with women, and then the impact, but in common people lay words language. So here the impact is very simple to understand, and it's very impressive, with some information at the bottom about what we're talking about, which journal, which year, where was it, and all of the orange parts are clickable and take you to the actual publication itself. And so we have many of these little cards. That's how it looks like. There is the link at the bottom if you want to use the link to visit the website. It's work in progress. We're building it, but it's astonishing to see how much good evidence of impact there is out there, and cuts across everything we do. WASH, immunization, even the cross-cutting, gender, adolescent, you find anything you want there. So the reason we've done that is also for advocacy, donors engagement, managers engagement in UNICEF, influencing policy, influencing funding. We need that type of evidence that is highly credible and highly impressive to handle the dialogues. Many more resources. I'm not going to go through them. All of these are hyperlinks that are active in the presentation, so feel free to take a look. I've mentioned some of the most important ones, so please feel free to navigate that yourself. The important things that are coming up for us is the operational guidance. So the programmatic guidance is, as the name indicates, programmatic. What we're trying to do now, and we're finalizing it, is give guidance for country offices to help them create the operational conditions that will allow them to deliver social and behavior change. So the operational guidance deals with staffing, what level of staff, how many staff, reporting to who, what is the structure, are they embedded or not embedded, how do you fund them, so financing mechanisms, accountability. So it's everything about the machinery of a country office, and we're finalizing that. I mentioned there's a lot of capacity building coming up. We are finalizing a few master classes with experts. We are finalizing basic introductory modules. So all of that will be available soon. A strong focus coming up on case studies from the field to balance a little bit something that appears to be fairly HQ driven, even if it is not. Some important partnership mechanisms that I can talk about if you're interested. And then there's the SBCC summit, obviously at the end of the year, which is usually an important event in the field and that has been postponed for a couple of years. So to summarize the shift, SBC, well, we capitalize on C4D. We reaffirm the centrality of communication, community engagement, and we leverage the years of practice that we have, but we also expand beyond that and try and explore new territories, fully embracing increasingly, hopefully, the behavioral science to help us make better decisions. And beyond all of that is the idea that we need to keep UNICEF as a leader in the field. I'll finish with addressing some type of reactions that I get sometimes when we discuss what that shift is about. On the overall perception, there are people who think that it's just a change of name, which it is not. We are seeing an increasing number of people doing different things thanks to that change. And so we are really trying to fuel a movement toward new type of tactics and approaches. But we also see people, especially in country offices, who tend to panic a little bit, thinking that the shift is completely different from what they were doing. So they risk becoming obsolete and losing their job, and nobody will lose her or his job. So the reality is that we are in the middle. We're trying to have an incremental improvement and take a step forward towards more quality and hopefully tactics that will help us get better results. The other very polarized debate is that, and that's more in the larger community of practice, even outside of UNICEF, a lot of people think that social change is really what our community of practice is about, and that the transformation of communities, of societies, of relationship between people will drive the results that we want, and so that's what we should be focusing on. And then there is the behavioral science community of practice, which tends to analyze more each behavior for what it is, more in silos. The reality is that we need both of them. We need both of them because, as I tried to explain at the beginning, both are objectives and they're also completely interdependent. So we won't be able to achieve what we're trying to do without these two aspects. So we're going to have to walk the line in between. That's it for me. I hope that was of interest. Happy to take questions. The link to the website is at the bottom. Back to you, Tommy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vincent, for this excellent presentation. It's very enlightening, very clear, well structured. And as I said at the beginning, we would like to keep the Q&A session at the very end. So we keep the flow going, and we'll invite Fatima Fraz now to give a brief presentation on the polio SBC work that is taking place in Pakistan. And after that, we'll have a Q&A. But as mentioned earlier, please put your questions in the chat box already now if you have them for Vincent, and we'll address them after Fatima's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Hello, everyone. If I can share the screen.
Vincent, you will have to make Fatima the host so she can share the screen. Thank you.
You should be a host now.
Yes, I can access. Thank you very much. I hope it's visible to everyone.
And Fatima, before you start, if there are any people in the waiting room, you can let them in. Thank you.
Can everyone mute their mic, please? Okay, the sharing stops. Okay, so after all the description of the shift from C4D to SBC and the importance of the SBC in UNICEF's mandate and programs, let's move towards the more practical example of implementation of basically a shift from C4D to SBC in polio program in Pakistan and how we have implemented it. So this is the outline of presentation. The points that I'm going to discuss with you, it's the Pakistan polio program shift from C4D to SBC. SBC model implemented in Pakistan, the core SBC principles that we are following, SBC approach followed by polio program, and one example of implementation and change in UC 9 of Union Council 9 of Karachi in Sindh province. So as we all know that we were following C4D strategies in polio eradication programs. So before we going into that, just to share a context with participants, before 2016, there was or you can say before 2015, there was a huge emphasis on advocacy and mass media communication, and we were following these strategies in engaging with communities to bring change and acceptance around vaccination. So around 2016, there was an realization that we probably need more community engagement, and we need to involve community to facilitate the process of vaccination. So it was led by a program around the evidence-based tools and all that. And then we started engaging with communities more and more to influence the decision around the acceptance of vaccination. But somewhere around 2017 and 18, there was a realization, after so many cases started coming up, there was a realization that probably we required to change our mindset. We required communities to take the lead around the behavior change. So it was more about facilitating them, enabling them to realize how important it is to take the lead in understanding the best practices around the health-seeking behaviors, how to protect their children. So making communities sit on the driver's seat became the focus of communication in polio eradication program in Pakistan. So if you can just briefly, quickly look into that communication for development, it's an evidence-based process that utilizes mix of communication tools, channels, and approaches to facilitate participation and engagement with communities. And then if you look at the social behavior, if you look at the social and behavior change programming, it requires much more than a simple understanding around the tools. It's about the change in fundamental mindset based on core principles of UNICEF that are human rights-based, people-centered, and system-oriented. So from community sessions and leaders' engagement to influence community and people, parents, or caregivers, we have moved towards a community engagement based on an approach we call challenge mapping, social data, where we enable community to take the decision around the health-seeking behavior and protection of their children. And it also supports the system strengthening. So this is the shift that we have observed in polio eradication program in Pakistan. Yes, so like Vincent already mentioned, that there are various models that we follow in SBC approach, or prior to that in C4D. In polio eradication initiative, it is socio-ecological model that we follow, and it highlights the factors that influence both individual and collective human behavior. So through advocacy, we enable to change policy or influence policymakers to bring the change with the support of stakeholders by involving community leaders and community notables, and then influencing individuals to change their knowledge, attitude, and behavior around certain behavior. So SEM is the model that we follow. And if we talk about the core SBC principles in polio eradication initiative, that is available there in the guideline. So the first one is human rights-based approach, which encourages local participation, empowerment of community, and evidence-based initiatives. So in polio eradication initiative in Pakistan, local participation of community in identifying real bottlenecks and possible solution at planning phase of intervention is very important. Empowerment of community, that they are leading the process for their own good, is a very notable practice. And evidence-based initiatives through quantitative data that we have, through focus group discussions and surveys, it's available there. Then it's a people-centered approach. Like I said, it's the participation of community as a leader, change agents, and community influencer is there. We focus on sustainability and proper techniques are used. Then it is a system-oriented approach. SBC intervention, planning, and implementation in polio program in Pakistan ensures full ownership of government and policymakers and relevant implementers. So if you specifically want to look all these approaches in the implementation, so we are doing that in super high risk UCs of Pakistan, where planning is based on the campaign data and social data. It is led by communities. It is thoroughly monitored and evaluated, and then it is supported by integrated service delivery model. The SBC approach that we are following, again, it is community engagement, and that is as it is like clear that it has a well-defined purpose of reaching missed children or enhanced demand for vaccination. It is based on a consultative planning process where communities are engaged right from the beginning of planning. It is representative. The participants are representative of the community and target group of caregivers. It is supported by government. All the relevant influencers are engaged, and then thorough reporting of the process, planning, implementation is observed towards the end. So when we talk about community engagement is based on challenge mapping. This is a tool that we used for community engagement. So challenge mapping is a data-driven process. It's a sophisticated process which is based on the data, social data around the communities, and it helps in identifying the high-risk areas in terms of geographic locations and identifying the targeted groups that are high alert for polio program. It lists down the bottleneck, identifies specific interventions and resources. It facilitates us in engaging the right influencers, define the process of implementation, and then helps us measuring the impact. So this is a very sophisticated process challenge mapping that helps us achieving results. And if we move forward, I'm going to share the example of community engagement through challenge mapping in Union Council 9 of Karachi, Sindh Province, Pakistan. So this is just the background, the situation of refusals in Karachi in March 2021. So the total number of refusal in Karachi at that time was 62,000, more than 62,000. And in super high risk UCs, which is this part, super high risk UCs, the refusals were 7,551, which is 12% of the total refusal. And if you look at this small blue circle, this is highlighting the Union Council 9, where there were total number of 622 still refusals. So this was the situation when we started this challenge mapping. And so, like I mentioned earlier, that in challenge mapping, it is not only we are focusing on the campaign data, it is supported by the social data analysis also. So if you look at the social data analysis of UC9, it showed that the majority of the refusals belong to the lower socioeconomic class and residing in the slum areas and the deprived areas. Refusals belong to the Pashtun ethnic group, migrated from KPK province, where moved from KPK province for economic reasons and as IDPs. Religiously, they are affiliated with Sunni Deobandi group, and most frequently reported reason of refusal is misconception and sickness. So this is just the obvious information, the apparent information that we are getting from the social data. But the information that we receive from challenge mapping tells us that Pashtuns obey tribal leaders and follow jirgas. Religious endorsement is important after approval of jirga. So it's not only jirga that they follow, the leadership that they follow, it's the religious endorsement that they require to take a decision is also there. So decision makers are male lead of the family, but then mother-in-law has an influence over sons and daughter-in-law. So high demand for better health facilities, medicines, and regular amenities is there. So this is all coming up, which helps us identifying the problem and probably the solutions also. Now, how we do the process of CE community engagement there by following all the principles of SBC. So first of all, from the data, we have the information around the reason of refusals, which is obviously misconception that OPV, oral polio vaccine, cause illness, then cause impotency in male child, a demand for better sewage system is there. So if we break down these reasons, it is medical reasons, then family influence, because they don't want to vaccinate their male child, and then demand for better sewage system. So to address this, for first two reasons, the medical one and the family influence, the misconception, we need to engage influencers that are relevant to that community. And that again comes from the same tool of challenge mapping that tells us that which doctors the same community goes to, which are the community elders, who are the jirga representatives, and the relevant doctors and the leaders, they are engaged. The female influencers, the local lady health worker is engaged to sort of address the issues with the community. And for demand for better sewage system, advocacy with local bodies and engagement with ISD group was done. So they can probably help in clearing the sewages there. So the tools that is used in the process are obviously the individual engagement was very important, CE sessions, digital media, and all relevant tools, they were made part of this community engagement process. Proper monitoring and evaluation of each step was done, and outcome, we'll see in the later slides that outcome shows the better coverage on vaccination. So as it is explained that all social mobilizers engage with frontline workers and community to get better results. Now, this is like the outcome. The data-driven SBC interventions have shown results in increased vaccination in UC9. If you look at NID March 2021 results, there were 622 still refusals. And if you look at NID May 2022, there are only 11 left. So the dots represent the missed child, the still refusal, the missed child. So the impact of how community is leading this change, how community is making their own decisions, it's visible. And if you look at overall Karachi, you can see in March 2021, we have darker areas more. And if you look at in May 2022, there is overall a 54% reduction in still refusal in this 1 year. So when we talk about other implementing strategies of SBC, overall SBC is supported by digital engagement, social listening, feedback and accountability, behavioral insights, partnerships, that all are very important strategies of social and behavior change communication, and we use all of them in polio eradication initiative in Pakistan. So towards the end, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of all polio workers. It will soon be eradicated, and the credit goes to our brave frontline workers who are working day and night with communities to bring this change. And I also want to acknowledge the support of Karachi team, our SBC specialist Jahan, and MBE officer Sana in supporting me making this presentation. Thank you very much, and over to Tommy.
Thank you, Fatima, for that snapshot of the SBC interventions in the Pakistan polio program. So we now have 25 minutes for questions. So if you are able to use the raise hand function, that would be wonderful. And Audrey will moderate Q&As. And again, if you have questions for either Vincent or Fatima, you can also write them in the chat box. So the floor is open for any feedback or comments or questions.
Thank you, Tommy. I recall that Dr. Motsem shared something, a question during Vincent's presentation. So if you would like to unmute and ask your question, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I think it was a question about why do we say having influence on decisions why don't we say having influence on decisions that affect their lives? Nice to talk to you again, Dr. Mohazem, by the way. I'm not the one who decided on that, just to be, when you do a unicef.org domain, you work with GCA, with the communication and advocacy team, and they have a lot of control over the way they word and present things, and they actually are pretty good at convincing you that they do a better job than the technical people in driving audiences and making people understand. So I'll take the question with them if you want, but yes, they decided that access decisions was a better way of phrasing it. It's a very pragmatic answer. I have a question. Can I?
Go ahead, Vincent. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question to Fatima. Fatima, that was great. And I know in many ways, and we can discuss that if people are interested, that polio is ahead of the game when it comes to the quality of interventions for the reasons that we know, including the amount of money, the manager scrutiny. I was interested by the one of the reasons being that people demand a better sewage system. Do you know what type of proportion that was, and if there was ever any better sewage system delivered to these communities? Because when I see the algorithm was great, by the way. The approach is great. It looks like, oh, we're going to advocate for that. That looks like a dead end to me. Am I reading well in between the lines that eventually the authorities never deliver the sewage system? You're on mute.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, these, like I mentioned, that they are living in slums, and the problem around the proper infrastructure is always there. It is always there. But when we go repeatedly for the vaccination, they take polio worker as a face of government, and these demands come. So we, instead of just blocking it or not addressing it, has started advocacy with government, local bodies, and through the and as a result, this integrated service delivery model has been introduced in these super high risk UCs, and that has actually supported. So the impact is there by diverting the attention and sort of focusing IST model in these deprived areas. The cleaning, the clearing of sewage has done in super high risk UCs. Although it is at a small scale, but it's just the beginning, and it is facilitating communities. It is improving their trust, and it is building the relationship between local bodies, government, and communities also. So maybe the impact is not very huge, but efforts are there, and it is positively impacting you.
Can I join with you, Fatima, to add on this?
Sure, Mohsen.
I think the whole sewage in Karachi is a politics, because it took about one union council in KP $200 million to fix the sewage problem. In Karachi, sewage is a bread and butter of many of the people. They don't want to let it solve the power politics of the gangsters. And there is a $1 billion World Bank project that is another politics playing. So I think other than the SBC, there is a larger politics that sewage becomes a part of the politics. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Any questions, comments, please? This is a chance to have the Vincent as the global SBC lead here with us. Use this opportunity, please. Have comments, questions. We still have 20 minutes. Thank you. Okay, I have one question, Vincent, regarding the. I worked in many country offices back in the day, and often at that time the C4D was sort of at the mercy of the sectoral programs to provide some funding for C4D strategies, and it was more like trying to convince and persuade the chief of WASH to invest in certain C4D strategies. So part of this strengthening is there also resources other than building human capacity? Are there financial resources also going to be increasing? For example, formative research is not cheap, and if that's something that we want to focus more on, where do we get the funding, or is that also in the plans? Thank you.
Yes. Yes. So people have been at the mercy of the sectors, as you said. Interestingly, the model we promote, the funding is still coming from the sector, but people shouldn't be at the mercy of the sectors. So let me explain that. And that's what I tried to explain with the results. We did a diagnosis of 129 country offices last year, analyzing their results framework across their CPD and analyzing all of their funding mechanisms. The main issue that we found during all of these interviews and analysis is the reason the money doesn't come is because the results are not there. So when the sectors develop their results framework for 4 years or 5 years, that's what they are accountable to. And usually our contribution is nowhere to be found. So what we're trying to push is for having at least one output that is SBC related in each of the outcomes, because then that drives the money, the collaboration, the contribution, because the sectors are then accountable for that particular results for which they need to work with us, on top of the program effectiveness, obviously. Sorry for those who are not in CPD type of language, but so I think realistically the money still will come from the sectors because that's where the money is. Education is an extremely rich sector. Money is driven by the sectors. Like we struggle to attract money for cross-sectoral purposes. So the fact that the money comes from them is not a problem. I think it's the lack of accountability, collaboration, and the lack of standardized processes that is an issue. So we are addressing that by planting the right results in the right place as the foundation for everything else. That said, in the operational guidance, we are also going through 7, 8, or 9 different financial models for country offices that we've seen across the board. And in many cases, having a levy or a percentage that is taken out of the overall operation of the office for cross-sectoral programs has been successful. Countries who have only relied on cross-sectoral fundings don't have enough funds to do proper SBC programming because, as you said, quality is expensive. So it's a combination. With the model we're promoting in the guidance technically is a combination of getting money from the sectors based on results that we are jointly accountable for, plus having a mechanism for a small percentage of funds that are taken upon grants and shared across the different cross-sectoral, just for the system strengthening internally and the things that are not necessarily sector specific.
Thanks. I don't see any hands. I have a sort of a follow-up question. So is in the capacity development package, is there a plan to deliver that also, not optionally, but almost like it has to be compulsory for deputy reps and for management to understand what SBC shift is, what are the areas we work in, and how do we deliver results? Or is that still is it still sort of an optional way for people to learn about SBC? And we sort of struggle sometimes in country offices to get that understanding and support for the at least in the back when I was in the field for C4D. But is there maybe a more centralized plan and systematic approach to get the whole organization-wide understanding and capacity in this area?
Right. That's a great question. The direct answer to your question is making things mandatory is way above my pay grade, and I don't have the means to do that. I actually think it's also above the pay grade of my supervisor. And that's true for the overall operational guidance. So everything you'll see in the operational guidance addresses staff, finances, capacity building, accountability. None of that is mandatory, or none of that can be prescriptive. Country offices have zero appetite for prescription. That's one of the strengths of UNICEF model anyway. It's the decentralization and the fact that countries can decide on what's best for them. That's also a limitation, but I personally like that model. So no, we're walking a line of convincing. That's what we're trying to do. We can strongly recommend, and we'll strongly recommend, but having this operational guidance mandatory would mean having it endorsed by DFM, DHR, PFP, and nobody will do it. And by the time we reach that stage, it will be obsolete. So the answer is no. That said, reps and dep reps are absolute priority audience in the shift. Some of the capacity tools that we're developing, I mentioned that very briefly, are specifically targeted to that audience. So the master classes that we're about to put out, they are not technical in nature. They're trying to take the perspective of a senior manager and explaining the importance of these approaches from a senior manager perspective. We are also working our way to a possible GMT type of meetings and audience, and Sanjay already agreed to reach out to all of the regional directors. So I'm probably going to be doing webinars for reps in each region, like region by region. I have requests. I was at the drops in SRO 2 weeks ago. I have many requests for RMTs and drops. So we're really, really pushing on managers, because the reality of our field is that SBC people are not the ones making decisions about SBC strategies and funding. Most of the staff in our network, pretty much 2/3 of them, about 70%, are NOA to NOCs. This is a large network that is vastly national and of lower level than others. So the decisions about what do we do, how do we invest, what is the quality level, lies with the sectoral chiefs and lies with the dep reps and the reps. So that's the reality of our field. That's not going to change anytime soon. So big focus. And the GTT also, towards the end of the year, will try and build a group called SBC Champions. We've started listing some reps, dep reps, DRDs, and we're going to try and have an active group of senior managers who are doing the promotions themselves, so that they don't hear it from me, but they hear it from their peers. So short answer, no, it's not mandatory. I cannot, but we have many strategies to try and work around it.
Great. I see a hand from Karina, and then there's a question from Guillaume in the chat.
Okay.
Karina, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thank you both. This is really interesting. Let me just go back to Tommy, your question about mandatory. One of the things that has worked here in Nigeria, when in Borno, our CFO made it mandatory that every proposal had to have a line for C4D.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that on the individual office can decide to make it mandatory. But I think, like what Vincent was saying, it's not something that we can mandate from headquarters. But so my question comes from the polio angle, where here in Nigeria, we've spent many years doing polio, which means doing C4D. And while the shift from C4D to SBC is pretty clear and pretty straightforward, there is less clarity on how that shift from polio ends up being into SBC. specifically, I think this is a huge opportunity for us to take advantage of the shift to SBC, but how can we sort of tweak it so that we add polio into this? Because so many of us have been labeled or branded as, well, you know polio, you don't know C4D, SBC, whatever. When in fact, I think the two grew up together, if not polio preceding C4D. So is there any thought on how we can support the polio colleagues as we go forward, as polio phases out? Hopefully CPDPV phases out and helps us phase out too. But in order to sort of maneuver us and position us so that SBC is a natural home. Over.
It's a very good question, Karina. I was actually on the subway this morning. I was asking myself, what does the shift mean for polio SBC colleagues? And the reason I was asking myself that is, one, because I've lost touch a bit with polio, as I said, so I've not been paying much attention in the recent years. My bad, and apologies. But also because back in the days when I was in polio, the quality standards were already very high in SBC for polio. And what Fatima presented today, I really wish that 10% of the sectoral programs would have that level of investment into using social data and using problem analysis and problem solving approaches. That's not the case. So the quality standards are already very high. 7 years ago, we were working already with, or even more than 7 years ago, I think 10 years ago, with the Harvard Opinion Research Program. We came up with the first trust strategy globally, way before people were discussing trust. The focus on frontline workers, vaccination experience, all of that was already through the roof. I know Nigeria pretty well, what the integration elements in northern Nigeria, in Kano, and I mean, all of that was extremely impressive. So, it's hard to tell people to go the extra mile when they are already so further, so far above the others. A couple things a few years ago that I think the program never really nailed down was the role of the female vaccinators, female mobilizers, which we know has always been seen as a mandatory thing that we never nailed down. Maybe you have right now. And the other one was the integration, which you've mentioned, and apparently Fatima also mentioned that is happening in Karachi as well progressively, which I think was probably one of the best strategy to bring coherence from the people's perspective. I remember in Afghanistan, we used to have double-digit number of campaigns every year. Sometimes 15 campaigns in Kandahar, like more than that in Jalalabad. From the perspective of people, these are all the same campaigns. They have seen hundreds of them. It's absolutely maddening. I wouldn't open my door personally. I mean, if you come to me 100 times with the same vaccine, you would stay outside. And already back in the days, I was struggling to understand which type of messaging or communication what could we tell these people to make them do something different. I was thinking that the real solution was already putting them in the driving seat and really let the communities drive the process for their own goods, which is some of the things that Fatima has mentioned. So I was very curious to understand to which extent we have done that. So I don't have an answer for you, Karina. I would need to, Rustam and Tommy and the experts probably have one. If your question was also related to finding a landing spot for the polio SBC colleagues, I don't think they should struggle so much, at least not in my opinion, but I don't make all of the hiring decisions. It is true that there's a bit of a stigma when people apply to positions and people see that they've been working for 15 years on polio because they think that they have a narrow view of what it is, but the reality is that the skills are very transferable. We've not developed the SBC shift with any program in mind. I can give you the same speech I gave today talking about VAC or talking about WASH or talking about anything. I think, I don't know where you are with the I mean, we were already discussing the legacy and all of these things 7-8 years ago. I don't know where you are with that, if it's delayed, but maybe the program should work on a specific plan to promote the skills of these SBC colleagues and anticipate their transition and landing somewhere. I'd be happy to work with Rustam or Tommy or whoever is interested in doing that, when the time comes, to make sure we present these skills in a very positive light. Things like Fatima presented, as I said, that's very impressive, and most of the SBC network is not doing things like that.
Yeah, that's briefly on my side, Karina. We at the headquarters in this year's work plan, we do have a plan to look at whatever C4D guidance there is in the polio program. That how do we integrate some of the elements that are now being strengthened, I would say, in the SBC programming. So, and how do we bring that to the polio work as well? In terms of the stigma, yes, I'm also like sometimes feeling that, but I think we know, but the perspective is that if you work in polio too long, that you're not really C4D. In reality, I almost feel that it's contrary, because we have resources, we have due quality SBC programming. So, but I don't know how to get rid of that stigma. But anyhow, any other questions or comments?
There's one from Guillaume that I see in the chat.
Okay.
I've tried to answer Claude's question. There's one from Guillaume. Thank you, Vincent and Fatima. I have not heard any experience from Africa on the move from C4D to SBC. Any reason for that? Reason probably being that I've not done my job well enough, because we should publicize it more. We had a SBC network meeting yesterday, and we had about 260 people presenting, including regions and countries, explaining how they were navigating this new approach and trying to make little steps forward. And both Wakaro and SRO are at the forefront of implementing new things, and they presented examples on Nigeria and Central African Republic on one side, and Ethiopia and Rwanda on the other side. Examples full of trying to address the services, trying to improve the policies, trying to build more accountability systems, trying to track better behaviors. The behavioral tracking from East Africa for COVID made the best of UNICEF research this year, the top 10. So both regions are definitely doing great stuff. So the reason you've not heard of it is probably because we don't show it or publicize it well enough. And I said in the presentation, knowledge management is going to be a big component moving forward. So I'll do my job better.
Thank you, Vincent. And if we don't have any further questions or comments, I really wish that, Vincent, this was a very excellent session from you and Fatima. I think this is valuable and sort of a first step for our polio SBC colleagues, how we try to bring more awareness and understanding of the shift, and how do we also can make sure that our own guidance in the polio program is aligned with this global SBC strategies and focuses. So I think I have made a mistake. I have not pressed the record button that Audrey told me. So I think this webinar is only recorded in English and not the French channel. So I really apologize. I acknowledge here in front of you, all the francophones, je m'excuse. But the presentations are available in English and French, and they have been shared by Audrey in the link, and they're available for anyone, even if you don't have a unicef.org email address. So thank you again for everyone, and have a great day, and we'll be in touch again soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.